You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
We love the earth. Take a little seed, put it in the ground, it'll come back to me. The Mother Earth, she's fed by the sun. She gives it back tenfold. Mother Earth, she gives us all we need. The food that we eat and the air that we breathe. Back to the roots, back to the earth. We're gonna tell her how to eat. We love the earth.
Oh, did you get your harp?
There we are. So sorry for the delay. Still working out all the kinks on this new system, and maybe that's exacerbated a bit by the fact that it's snowy here in Denver, Colorado. That's right. Woke up this morning to the sight of snowflakes falling down here in Lakewood is where I'm stationed right at the moment. There's still some snow out on the mountains and out on the trees, but it's looking okay. It's not as if we're going to have a real bad time driving around at this point. It looks pretty safe that way. But if you haven't made your way out to the Cannabis Cup yet, you might want to pack a hoodie, maybe a hat, some gloves. It's a little cool out here, kind of surprising, but the folks here in Colorado tell me it's not all that surprising. April is actually one of their snowier months, believe it or not. All sorts of fun stuff going on here on the show today. We are going to be talking about Kevin Sabet, our good friend, the Joker to my Batman. He was on public radio today in California debating with Paul Armentano, the deputy director of NORML. They were discussing that recent case where the federal judge refused to reschedule marijuana, refused to take it out of Schedule 1. Paul had some really sensible things to say about it. And, of course, Kevin Sabet took the opportunity to spread more of his misinformation and reefer madness. So stay tuned, because later on in the show tonight, we are going to talk about that and give you some clips, some highlights that we recorded from that debate. Kevin Sabet also admitted that marijuana is safer than cocaine. That's right. At least he's making some progress. We'll let that go on into the radical rant. And I'm going to talk about Kevin Sabet's unspoken third way that he always hints at. He always says, we don't need to have prohibition. We don't need to have legalization. But he never specifies exactly what his third way is. I'm going to show you 8 different ways that we could legalize marijuana, and only one of them has anything to do with commercialization. Also on the show today, everyone's getting really excited about the Sanjay Gupta Weed 3 special that is coming up this weekend, this Sunday. You want to check that out. And the money quote from the Sanjay Gupta op-ed is, we should legalize medical marijuana, we should do it nationally, and we should do it now. We're going to talk all about talk about Sanjay Gupta's Weed 3 special and why medical marijuana is a good start, but it just doesn't go far enough. Speaking of how medical marijuana doesn't go far enough, today in Behind the Headlines, we're going to take a look at Washington State, which has just passed a bill to pretty much decimate the medical marijuana system up there and fold it almost all into the recreational marijuana system. But first, we start things off with the 420 Radio News. And in the headlines today, we've got the CNN Weed 3 special eliciting a great quote from President Obama. Washington State's bill to reconcile medical and recreational has gone to the governor's desk. The governor in Georgia has signed the CBD-only medical marijuana law. Vermont lawmakers are talking about starting alcohol prohibition to make a point about marijuana prohibition. And an AM radio station in Colorado Springs has rebranded itself as K-High 1580 AM. We'll talk about that. And in hour 2, bring up the possibility that this show might be heard on K-High. All that, plus we'll take your calls at 84-420 radio. That's 844-207-2346. The news is next. Stick around. We're right back after this.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization. Are you tired of storing your herb in back alley baggies? Then keep your herb fresh and protected with Pottles. Pottles are airtight and odor-free. Not to mention they're reusable, BPA-free, and UV-resistant. Pottles come in a variety of sizes, styles, and colors, so go check out Pottles at mypottles.com. Use the code STASH to get an additional 10% off. Again, that's mypottles.com, mypottles.com, and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
Funky roller.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening, Groovy Cats? This is your Funk Master of Ceremonies, Big Daddy, and I want you to join me every Thursday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here at the Funky Roller Ring.
Oh, yeah.
Your home of soul, funk, and disco, baby.
Funky-licious.
There's always a party at the Funky Roller Ring.
Support for 420 Radio comes from Kick-Ass Cannabis and Veggies, a guide to gardening with nature, authored by Kip Zonderkopf. Based on the ethos that a living soil is the foundation of a thriving garden, Kick-Ass Cannabis and Veggies is your guide to naturally growing resinous buds and nutrient-rich veggies. Get the ebook now with instant download at kickassorganics.com. Previews available on Amazon, iTunes, Nook, Google Play, Kobo, and many other online retailers. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Thursday, April 16th, 2015. In a CNN special to be aired on Sunday, not only will President Barack Obama state his full support of medical marijuana, he'll also advocate for alternative models of drug abuse treatment which don't involve incarceration. The television special, called Weed 3, features CNN's chief medical correspondent, Sanjay Gupta. The president said, quote, "I'm on record as saying that not only do I think carefully prescribed medical use of marijuana may in fact be appropriate, and we should follow the science as opposed to ideology on this issue, but I'm also on record as saying that the more we treat some of these issues related to drug abuse from a public health model, and not just from an incarceration model, the better off we're going to be. You know, one of the great victories of this country has been our ability to reduce incidences of smoking and increase the incidences of seatbelt use," Obama told Sanjay Gupta. "You know, we save tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives every single year. We didn't throw anybody in jail. We just made sure that they were well informed. And if somebody has an addiction, we made sure that we made it easy for them to get help." The Washington State Senate on Tuesday gave final legislative approval to a bill that sweeps medical marijuana into the state's strictly regulated recreational system. Now the bill heads to Governor Jay Inslee. Sponsored by Senator Ann Rivers, a Republican, the measure would phase out collective marijuana gardens by July 2016, create a voluntary database of medical marijuana patients, and set standards for medical pot, how its use is authorized. It would also establish a merit system for dispensaries seeking to join the regulated industry. Under the bill, patients in the state registry would be allowed to possess 3 times as much marijuana as users in the recreational system, and they could grow as many as 6 plants at home unless a doctor authorizes more. Patients could band together in cooperatives of up to 4 people to share expenses of growing up to 60 plants. With a stroke of a pen, Governor Nathan Deal has made medical marijuana legal in Georgia. Deal signed a bill into law at 11 a.m. that makes the use of cannabis oil legal for 9 medical conditions. Cancer, when such diagnosis is end stage or the treatment produces related wasting illness. Recalcitrant nausea and seizure disorders related to the diagnosis of epilepsy or trauma-related head injuries. Crohn's disease, mitochondrial disease, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, or sickle cell disease, but only when such diagnosis is severe or end stage. State health officials say doctors will have to sign off and submit required forms. Approved Georgia patients will be allowed to possess 20 ounces of the low THC oil at any given time. It is still illegal to grow marijuana in Georgia, meaning families will have to transport the drug from states like Colorado. Vermont may well become the next state to legalize marijuana, and 2 state lawmakers who support legalization have a simple message for their colleagues. Give us what we want, or we'll take away your booze. A new bill filed earlier this month by State Representatives Gene O'Sullivan and Christopher Pearson would effectively reinstate alcohol prohibition in Vermont. If passed, House Bill 502 would outlaw consumption of alcohol, with penalties mirroring those currently in place for marijuana possession. Those found with small amounts of alcohol would be subject to fines of up to $500, and anyone involved in the sale and distribution stream could face up to 30 years in prison and $1 million in penalties. O'Sullivan herself acknowledges that even she doesn't support the substance of the bill. Rather, quote, the object was to basically embarrass leadership to say that we have marijuana legalization bills in front of us, and they're going absolutely nowhere. An AM station in Colorado Springs has rebranded itself as K-High 1580, a cannabis-centric talk station. The station, owned by Pilgrim Communications and operated by SoCo Radio, was previously a Fox Sports affiliate. Program director Len Williams describes K-High as, quote, pure education, entertainment, and awareness of marijuana, end quote. The format debuted on Monday, April 13th, and today, Williams got his first complaint call. Otherwise, he says, quote, the buzz has been very positive, absolutely great, with a lot of people telling us it's a great idea, and comments coming from people who, for lack of a better word, aren't stoners and don't partake. This has been your 420 Radio News for Thursday, April 16th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville. You can get 420 Radio on the go with our Shoutcast stream for all internet-enabled media players. Go to rad-r.us/420shout, or just click the Shoutcast icon below the live radio feed at 420radio.org. Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
If you're an adult who enjoys a good beer, there's a similar product you might want to know about. One without all the calories and serious health problems. Less toxic so it doesn't cause hangovers or overdose deaths, and it's not linked to violence or reckless behavior. Marijuana. Less harmful than alcohol, and time to treat it that way. For more information, visit marijuanaissafer.org.
The fingerboard extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard Extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com. Welcome back, everyone. 15 after the hour, and today we mentioned that the Washington State Legislature has passed a bill by Republican legislator to basically fold in the medical marijuana system into recreational. There's a lot of major changes that are happening in this particular bill. For one thing, the medical dispensaries that are unlicensed, that are undercutting the recreational I-502 shops and are subject to very little regulation, they are out. They are basically out, and that bill that has passed today, and assuming it makes it through the veto process by the governor, Washington's governor does have the power of sectional veto. You can veto entire sections of a bill. But most of these dispensaries in Washington State are going to shut down. There's estimated to be about 300 marijuana businesses within the city of Seattle itself. And the medical businesses haven't had to play by the same rules as far as being 1,000 foot from a school or 1,000 foot from a park. So that's another reason why they've been so many more. Basically, what will happen for patients is if they have a doctor's recommendation, they will have to buy their marijuana at the recreational stores under I-502. Now, there will be a new licensing scheme, a new, basically a mark or a endorsement that recreational stores can get, a medical endorsement for their store that lets them carry products that are intended for medical use, and that they have staff that can answer medical questions. They will also be allowed to give away marijuana for free to low-income patients, unlike recreational stores are prevented from doing that. However, that means that the patients will be facing the same sort of onerous taxation scheme that the current recreational consumers are facing. The registry does get you a small tax break. It does mean that you won't have to pay the sales taxes, but the 30 to 37% excise taxes that are proposed would still be in play. That's going to make medical marijuana far too expensive for many of the patients who need so much of it. As far as cultivating marijuana, the patient collectives are now gone. Those are how many of the dispensaries have been operating through a collective loophole. They had been able to collectively cultivate up to 45 marijuana plants among 10 people. That has been changed now to collective gardens, or I should say cooperative gardens, that will be allowed to cultivate up to, 60 plants in the cooperative garden. So there will be an option for patients who need that. Unfortunately, those cooperative gardens are required to be a mile away from any existing marijuana retailer. I don't know why. Is this maybe to prevent the idea that the cooperatives would be serving patients in the way that the old dispensaries would, but I don't see exactly how that would be possible. Now, the major problem that I have with this new medical setup is they're reducing the limits that the patients are allowed to have. And it's an interesting situation. There will be a patient registry, but it is a voluntary patient registry. That is, you don't have to sign up for it. And you can still, if you're a patient who hasn't signed up on the registry, you'll be allowed to possess what everyone else is allowed to possess, just 1 ounce. Just 1 ounce, 16 ounces of edibles, 72 ounces of tinctures. And you'll be able to grow 4 plants at home, unlike the recreational consumers. So even medical consumers who don't sign up for the registry will be able to home grow, unlike the current recreational people who have no home grow options. However, the current home grow options for medical patients are 15 plants. So we're talking about unregistered patients going from 15 plants to a mere 4. Also, if you do choose to join the voluntary registry, that's how you will get that sales tax break at the recreational stores. It will also give you the ability to possess 3 times the limits recreational consumers can possess. That's 3 ounces of marijuana. But again, current limit for a medical marijuana patient in Washington State is 24 ounces. So it's going to be very difficult for patients to have to adjust to this new system. And really, only thing to blame is not legalization of recreational marijuana, but the failure to properly regulate medical marijuana over the past 16 years that has led to this dichotomy, this disparity that the legislature has now addressed.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get laid.
All right, everybody, it's 4:20 here in Denver, Colorado, home of the Denver Cannabis Cup, where the vendors will be unable to give out free samples, they say. But you know, adults can still give samples to each other. So how are you going to tell the difference between an adult giving away a sample versus a business giving away a sample? I have a feeling we're going to surf these loopholes this weekend. You can get 420 Radio on the go with the TuneIn Radio app for all mobile platforms. Go to rad-r.us/420tunein or just click the TuneIn Radio icon below the live radio feed on 420radio.org. Get.Buzz. .Buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .Buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .Buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .Buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. Connect with 420radio.org through social media, on Twitter at 420radio.org, and our Facebook page at 420radio.org. Follow us and like us today. You'll be glad you did. Are you in the market for portable vaporizers now? Get online to vapes.buzz, the quick and easy link to portablevaporizers.now.com. Vapes.buzz has everything you are looking for, including vape pens, herbal vaporizers, e-juice, parts, accessories, and more. Visit vapes.buzz and use promo code 420radio to get 10% off your online purchase, or just give them a call at 866-264-2415. Vapes.buzz. Get vaping, baby! The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life, conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay, rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult marijuana prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat. Welcome back, everybody. It's 22 and a half after the hour, and the big quote going around the internet today, Dr. Sanjay Gupta saying we should legalize medical marijuana. We should do it nationally, and we should do it now. Everybody's very excited about the Sunday night premiere of Weed 3 on CNN. It'll be following some other marijuana shows that they have on there as well. Seems like you can't turn on cable news these days without seeing some documentary or program about marijuana. And while it's a very good thing to hear from the mainstream and so many people who will take Dr. Gupta's word for it versus mine or anyone else fighting for it in the marijuana legalization front, I think it's important at this point to take a moment and recall that there is no such thing as medical marijuana. Yes, I know that shocks people when I say it, but we can't legalize medical marijuana. I can't go out to a farm or a garden and point at a set of plants and say, aha, see, those are medical plants. Those have to be legal. And then point at somebody else's plants and say, aha, those are recreational plants. Those have to be illegal. Trying to maintain this idea, this fiction, that marijuana is a medical plant versus just being a plant is something that's going to be our ultimate undoing. I've been saying this for a long time, since the beginning of formulating the Box Canyon theory, that if you continue to fight only for medical marijuana, your marijuana will become medical only. We see that in the framing that we're hearing from the news media now, where it says Governor Deal signed a medical marijuana bill in Georgia. No, he didn't. He signed a bill that legalized certain extracts of marijuana. You can't have a marijuana plant. It's not medical marijuana. And continuing to try to draw this line over what is medical use, because folks, that's where the line is the person who's using it. It's the consumer who makes marijuana medical or not the plant itself. The plant is medical regardless of who's using it. The plant is recreational regardless of who's using it. That is to say, the cancer patient who is using the medical marijuana to quell their nausea may also feel a little bit of a high. And I, who use marijuana to get high, might feel some medical effect in my lower backache. It works recreationally and medically for all people, regardless of their need for it. So yes, Dr. Gupa, we need to legalize medical marijuana in the sense of allowing people to use marijuana for medical purposes. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking that that means that marijuana is solely medical or should be solely medical. When we try to maintain this artificial distinction, this line that determines whether or not someone's use of marijuana is appropriate for medical circumstances, invariably two things will happen. One, some deserving patient will be caught on the wrong side of the line, maybe through no fault of their own. Maybe they just don't have the right condition. Maybe their condition isn't severe enough, like that Georgia bill where, sure, you can get medical marijuana for Lou Gehrig's disease, but only if it's really severe or end stage. If it's just that beginning Lou Gehrig's disease, you have to wait until it ravages your body some, ravages your brain some, before you're able to get on medical marijuana or low THC cannabidiol extract in Georgia. And that only happens because somebody has to draw a line that says, on this side, you're sick enough not to imprison. On the other side, you belong in a cage. So that Lou Gehrig's disease sufferer in Georgia, who's just not quite severe enough yet, ends up on the wrong side of the line. And the other thing that invariably happens is recreational consumers wind up on the other side of the line. They will always find a way. We will always find a way to get in through any loophole or technicality we can to avoid being arrested for our personal use of marijuana. And sometimes that's because we're patients that are using it for a non-approved reason, insomnia, anxiety, depression, whatever it might be. Maybe we don't want to get on a government list. Maybe we don't want to have to carry a card around. Maybe we don't think we should have to carry a card around. So no matter how hard you try to draw that line and how bright and sharp that line might be drawn, invariably it's going to hurt some patients, and it's not going to stop a very dedicated recreational user from abusing it. And we've seen the effect of this in Washington State now, where the changes they're making to the medical marijuana program aren't going to have any effect on the low-use patients or the recreational users who've been gaming the medical marijuana system. It's not going to affect them at all. But that severely ill multiple sclerosis patient who's been growing 15 plants and getting by on 8, 10, 12, 24 ounces of medicine in Washington State, who now has to go down to 6 plants and 3 ounces, that desperately affects her. Doesn't change a thing for the recreational people. It's time to stop trying to draw this line between medical and recreational. Make everything a cannabis law that's broad enough to apply to everyone. Set the limits for patients, for everybody.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the Ustream video app for Android and iPhone. Go to rad-r.us/420Ustream or just click the Ustream app icon for Android or iPhone below the live radio feed at 420radio.org. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for NORML, and I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. If the hideous monster Frankenstein came face to face with the monster of marijuana, he dropped dead from fright.
You know, it's not easy countering 7 decades of propaganda in a 2-hour show, but let's try. It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Reefer Madness Debunked.
All right, welcome back, everyone. 31 after the hour, and today I was treated to a radio program coming out of the Bay Area in California. It's public radio, and on the program today was Paul Armentano, the deputy director of NORML, and Kevin Sabet from Project SAM. And the subject of the discussion was the recent decision by a federal court judge in Northern California to deny a motion on the constitutionality of marijuana's Schedule 1 designation. And of course, that Schedule 1 designation is the one that says marijuana is a dangerous drug with no medical benefit that cannot be used safely under medical supervision. Schedule 1 is what puts marijuana in the same category as heroin, LSD, ecstasy, PCP, psilocybin mushrooms, and so forth. Now, in discussing the Schedule 1 categorization of marijuana, the question went to Kevin Sabet as to whether or not marijuana should be rescheduled. Here's what Kevin had to say.
You know, just because marijuana and heroin are, for example, in the same category, it doesn't actually mean that the government thinks that they are the same, that they have the same amount of harmfulness.
And to that extent, Kevin is absolutely right. The scheduling of drugs, while it does have some effect on where they land on the federal trafficking statutes, it's not absolute. I actually looked it up today because whenever I hear Kevin Sabet mention something, the first thing I want to do is look it up for myself. And generally speaking, there is this kind of a tiered system for prosecution of trafficking in various schedules of drugs. For example, if we get Schedule 5, a Schedule 5 drug is like codeine. A lot of the codeine preparations are Schedule 5. And first offense for distributing any amount of Schedule 5 can be up to a year in federal prison and up to a $250,000 fine. That's Schedule 5. You get to Schedule 4. Schedule 4 includes drugs like Darvocet. Darvocet's a Schedule 4 drug. Any amount of that's going to get you up to 5 years, up to $1 million fine. Any amount of a Schedule 3 drug, that includes things like anabolic steroids and human growth hormones and sex hormones and so forth. Schedule 3 drugs will get you get you anywhere from 10 to 15 years and up to a $2.5 million fine. Then our Schedule 2 drugs, and there's a lot of different Schedule 2 drugs out there, can get you up to 20 years, $5 million fine. And generally your Schedule 1 drugs get you a mandatory minimum of 5 years and up to life in prison with up to a $25 million fine. So for almost all the drugs on the schedule, 1 through 5, there's this consistent stair-step hierarchy where the penalties get more severe the more dangerous the drug is. That is, the lower it is on schedule. If it's on Schedule 1, it's really dangerous. You get up to life in prison. Schedule 5, all the way at the bottom of the schedule, you might get up to a year. But there are a few drugs that violate this standard. And of course, marijuana is one of them. When you look at marijuana, it's broken down into 4 different levels in the federal sentencing system. The first level is if you have 0 to 50 kilograms or 0 to 50 plants. Well, obviously, you can't have 0 plants, so 1 to 50 plants, right? So anything below 50 kilograms, anything below 50 plants or up to 50 plants is going to get you the same penalty as you get for any amount of Schedule 4 drug. Think about that. If you're growing 1 marijuana plant, you will do less time and pay a lower fine than someone caught dealing a metric ton of codeine. 1 marijuana plant, more punishment than a metric ton of codeine. And the same punishment as a metric ton of Darvocet. 1 marijuana plant gets you the same punishment in federal code as a metric ton of Darvocet. Now, the way that the grid goes is that you get up to 50 plants is that level. Then if you go from 50 to 99 plants, you're in the Schedule 2 level. At 50 to 99 plants or 50 to 99 kilograms of marijuana, you can get 0 to 20 years in prison, or if there was violence involved, 20 years to life, and you can spend $1 to $5 million in fines. Again, that's the same penalty you'd get for any other Schedule 2 drug other than cocaine, meth, or PCP. It's also the same penalty you'd get for dealing a metric ton of GHB or anything more than a gram of Rohypnol. GHB and Rohypnol are the date rape drugs. That's right. For 50 marijuana plants, you can get the same punishment as a metric ton of date rape drugs. At the next level, we move up to 100 to 999 plants. This will get you the same amount of time as if you were transporting a pound of heroin or 9 grams of acid. And it doesn't sound like much, but folks, 9 grams of acid when it's measured in micrograms is a lot of acid. 100 marijuana plants will get you the same penalties, 5 to 40 years minimum, 5 to 40 minimum, 20 to life maximum, up to a $25 million fine. Same penalty as if you were trafficking up to 10 pounds of cocaine and up to 1 pound of methamphetamine and up to 2 pounds of PCP and up to 400 grams of fentanyl. Same penalty, 100 plants, 10 pounds of cocaine. And the final level, if you have over 1,000 plants, 1,000 or more, that's a 10-year mandatory minimum, and you can get up to life in prison and up to a $50 million fine. Same penalty for 1,000 marijuana plants as over 5 kilograms of cocaine, over a half kilogram of meth, over a kilogram of PCP, and over 400 grams of fentanyl. So yes, Kevin Sabet is absolutely right. The scheduling has nothing to do with how badly you're going to get punished when it comes to marijuana. When it comes to all the other scheduled drugs, it's a pretty standard punishment scheme. Now, another thing Kevin Sabet had to say about the scheduling is that
cocaine is actually Schedule 2.
Oh,
not
okay.
because we think cocaine is safer than marijuana. That's absolutely not the case. Nobody in their right mind would say that.
Folks, you just heard Kevin Sabet admit that marijuana is safer than cocaine. You'd have to be out of your mind to think that cocaine is safer than marijuana. So he's pointing out that the current scheduling of marijuana in Schedule 1 has nothing to do with its safety. That what it has to do is the fact that cocaine is a medically useful drug in certain situations. Well, if marijuana is not a medically useful drug, I don't know what is.
Cocaine is Schedule 2 because it fulfills that definition of some minor medical use in a surgical setting.
Yeah, they use cocaine for certain nasal anesthetics and dental anesthetics. So cocaine has medical use and is still far more dangerous than marijuana, even according to Kevin Sabet. Now, knowing that marijuana is safer than cocaine, why shouldn't it be rescheduled? Why shouldn't it be moved down in the schedule to provide the opportunity for more research? Well, according to Kevin Sabet, rescheduling wouldn't change much.
Is that it would give a symbolic victory, I think, to legalization advocates by saying, oh, look at this, looky here, even the government says it's not as harmful as it used to be.
So apparently the rescheduling of marijuana into a more logical schedule, matching the fact that it does have recognized medical use in the United States and is safe to use under a doctor's supervision, would merely be a symbolic victory, according to Kevin Sabet. And yet, he actually said this as well during the interview.
It's a lot easier for someone to get a license to study a Schedule 4 drug, let's say, for example, versus a Schedule 1 drug. So absolutely, there's some, of course, practical difference.
Okay, so rescheduling marijuana would just be a symbolic victory for the legalizers to say, look what the government just did. But then Kevin goes on and admits that it's easier for scientists to study a Schedule 4 drug than a Schedule 1 drug.
We should do research, by the way, on the medical components. That's fine. And Paul made it out to be like we only can do that if we reschedule. That's nonsense. We have multiple drugs going through the scheduling process now based on true raw plant material of marijuana that folks are looking at, the scientists are looking at for things like MS and cancer.
Oh, okay. So first, marijuana rescheduling was just symbolic. Then marijuana is safer than cocaine, and it's easier to study a Schedule 4 drug than a Schedule 1 drug, but we should keep it in Schedule 1 while Kevin Sabet says we should study the drug more. Anyone else's head hurt from all of this? Now, of course, Paul Armentano had a much more sensible thing to say about the case itself, which is the fact that it wasn't the judge's job to decide whether Congress made any sense at all with its Schedule 1 designation.
This case really hinged more on the standard, the rational basis standard that was applied by the judge in this case than it had to do with any evidence that the judge reviewed in this case. In fact, the federal government, in their own briefs, were very clear that the rational basis standard was the lowest standard that could be applied. And in fact, they said that under this standard, Congress is not required to be right, nor does it matter if the basis with which Congress made their decision turns out to be wrong. They said that as long as they can identify a credible expert who agrees with the federal government's position, and there is therefore disagreement among experts, that it is not the court's responsibility to settle this scientific disagreement. It is simply the court's responsibility to uphold the law.
Isn't that fascinating that under a test known as a rational basis, the rational basis says Congress does not have to show that it was rational in making marijuana Schedule 1. It does not have to show that Schedule 1 is a rational designation for marijuana. It doesn't even have to show that the data has changed or the basis under which they made Schedule 1 had any rationality to it. No, the rational basis just says whether or not Congress can make this law and whether or not there's disagreement amongst the scientific community. And when you've got Big Pharma paying off scientists to say bad things about pot, it's not that hard to find controversy. We're going to talk some more about this. I got some more clips from Kevin Sabet and play Project Sam Bingo. Get your Project Sam Bingo cards out. Mark your spots for big marijuana. What about the children? Marijuana is so much more potent. Not your father's Woodstock weed, I tell you. All that's coming up right after these messages.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio is 24-hour marijuana legalization radio.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
Continue the conversation with Radical Russ online. Visit radicalruss.com and email radicalruss@gmail.com.
This is Radical Russ encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay, read the Weed Blog today.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
And one major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 47 after the hour, coming to you live from Denver, Colorado, where the snow is still on the ground, and we're looking forward to the Cannabis Cup coming up this weekend. The 18th, 19th, and 20th should be a really good time. We just finished up listening to some clips from Kevin Sabet, who is on the radio today in California, trying his darndest to maintain the prohibition of marijuana. It's not going so well for Kevin and his friends as more and more states continue to legalize, to pass medical marijuana, as the opinion polls continue to show majority support for the end of prohibition. It gets tougher and tougher for Kevin to maintain the spin and propaganda necessary to fool just enough people to maintain criminal prohibition. But he tried his best as he went out at the end of the clip discussing this terribly dangerous drug.
This is particularly harmful, especially to the adolescent brain, especially when it comes to things like schizophrenia or psychosis and mental illness, tremendous impacts, especially when it comes to things like drug driving, especially when it comes to things like learning and IQ. And we know now that regular marijuana use in adolescence can lead to an 8-point reduction in IQ later in life.
No, I'm afraid, Kevin, that the 8-point IQ thing has been debunked so soundly by this point that it's embarrassing that you even bring it up anymore. Everybody recognizes that study was flawed and did not take socioeconomic factors into account, and has been followed up by 2 or 3 studies now that have shown no difference in the intellectual capabilities of people who use marijuana, even those who use it often. And as far as this mental illness and schizophrenia stuff he talks about, the worldwide rate of schizophrenia has remained anywhere between 1 and 1.1% for about a century now. And that was before marijuana was real popular. As marijuana became popular, as it became less popular, as it became more popular, as it became medical, as it became decrim, as it became legal, the rates of mental illness are not showing any appreciable uptick. And it's not as if marijuana was just discovered in the Amazon rainforest. We would know by now if the continued, constant, chronic use of marijuana inexorably led to some sort of brain disability, any sort of mental illness or psychological issue. We know it by now. The problem for Kevin and all these scares is that marijuana is not new. We would have seen the damage by now if everything he said was as bad as as he thinks it is.
But to say that from the recreational side, there's some controversy about the science actually isn't true at all. It reminds me of what Big Tobacco said 50 years ago when they tried to say, as recently as even as 20 years ago, that tobacco wasn't addictive and that we're not really sure what the science says about lung cancer.
Here's the problem with the whole Big Tobacco was lying analogy, and that's the fact that Big Tobacco had to lie. Big Tobacco was selling a poison, an addictive poison. A stinky, smelly, addictive poison. Yes, you have to lie about that kind of product in order to get people to buy it. When it comes to marijuana, Big Marijuana doesn't have to lie. Its product doesn't kill people. Its product isn't toxic. Its product does deliver medical effects. When Big Tobacco was lying about the medical effects of nicotine and cigarettes, they were doing so by paying their own doctors and own researchers to go through this and to find technicalities, loopholes, bad studies, whatever they could to justify continuing to sell their toxic, poisonous, addictive, stinky, smelly product. When it comes to marijuana, in order for his analogy to hold, there would have to be some huge marijuana corporation secretly funding these researchers to come out with this astounding information about marijuana's medical benefits, when instead what it is a handful of parents in Georgia who find out that oil works good for their epileptic kids. It's a handful of patients in the Bay Area who discovered that it quelled the nausea and wasting from AIDS. It's a handful of cancer patients in Colorado who learned that it helped to shrink their tumors. It's millions and millions of anecdotes over hundreds and thousands of years, not some big conspiracy junk science expenditure from some massive corporation trying to fool the public. Even by the rules of analogy, it doesn't work, Kevin. But the more I listen to Kevin Sabet, the more one particular thing he says sticks in my craw.
And I think we should listen to the scientists, and that's exactly what Congress is doing by keeping it in Schedule 1. Doesn't mean we want people to go to jail or prison. Doesn't mean we want to give them criminal records. We can have a sensible policy without legalizing it. We can medicalize it responsibly, not put people in prison, but we don't need to create Big Tobacco 2.0.
Okay, so in Kevin Sabet's world, there is prohibition where we lock people up for their use of marijuana, give them criminal records, whether or not they're using it medically or not. And then there's this legalization thing that's going to, this terrible big marijuana, Big Tobacco 2.0 that's going to prey on the weak. And he keeps implying that there's some middle ground. There's some third way that he supports. He says we can do medical marijuana without having people smoking a joint for back pain. We can do the research on this without having to throw people in prison or give them criminal records. But the problem, Kevin, you never tell us what this particular policy guideline actually looks like. What should happen to a person who is caught by a police officer in possession of pot? Kevin seems to be telling us that that person shouldn't get a criminal record, and then that person shouldn't be arrested. So what should happen to that person? I propose nothing. That the person holding that marijuana should be subject to no punishment or intervention by any third party, so long as he's not harming anyone else. But Kevin won't tell us that. He won't tell us what he expects should happen. Now, I've read the Project Sam stuff. I know what he really thinks should happen, and that is the adult who's caught with marijuana by a police officer should be fined, sanctioned, punished in some way in order to deter them from wanting to use marijuana, even if they're not harming themselves or others. That shouldn't lead to jail time or a criminal record. So is Kevin Sabet proposing marijuana decriminalization? Because that's what decriminalization is. When you are fined or somehow punished administratively for possessing marijuana. Yet I don't hear Kevin talking about how we need to decriminalize personal possession of marijuana. And how about the cultivation of marijuana, or the selling of marijuana, or people who might be stashing more than a personal amount of marijuana? On those fronts, we hear even less from Kevin Sabet, because Kevin Sabet wants to maintain the criminal punishments for those levels. If you're a grower or a seller, he wants to maintain that black market. In fact, I've heard him say that that's one of the downsides of prohibition, is that the consumers have to get it from a black market, but the downside of that is better than the downside of a commercialized big tobacco 2.0. So to try to help Kevin out, and God knows why I should, but just to help him out, I'm feeling a little sorry for the guy because he's getting his ass handed to him. I thought I would come up with some things that would solve Kevin Sabet's problem. He says he doesn't want people arrested. He says he doesn't want people having criminal records. He says he wants medical use to be allowed, but he doesn't want commercialization. He doesn't want big tobacco 2.0. So in the idea of giving him the third way, I'm actually going to give him 8 ways. That's right, there's not a third way between prohibition and commercialization, Kevin Sabet. There are actually 8 different ways to legalize marijuana, avoid big tobacco 2.0, stop arrests, sanctions, punishments, criminal records, and provide medical marijuana. Here they are. The number one thing we could do, we could have a grow and give system, like Washington, D.C. Adults can grow their own marijuana, they can possess their own marijuana, they can give it to each other, but no commercialization, no pot shops, no stores. I asked Kevin if he'd actually support the grow and give system when it was on the ballot, when I saw him in October, and he said he couldn't support it because if they got that, then they would move forward with commercialization. Oh, okay, so we can't pick one of the middle ground options because eventually someday somebody might want to move it out further. We could go with a communal kind of system, like they have in Spain, where you join a collective and you can buy marijuana within your collective, but that's it. You have to belong to a collective. No commercialization there. We could go with a retail sale only model, kind of the Dutch coffee shop model. Keep the growing and the possession, or the growing and the trafficking side of it, the wholesale side of it, still technically illegal. But on the retail side, people can buy marijuana in a nice, well-lit shop, subject to regulations, and nobody gets a criminal record. That's an option. How about a government supply chain, kind of a Uruguay model? The government grows all the weed and sells all the weed to registered patients. No commercialization there. No arrests, no incarceration, no punishment. Medical's legal. How about we go with a public authority? You know, kind of a state-run liquor store kind of model, where private entities could produce the stuff, but it would all be under the auspices of the state and sold through state-run stores. No commercialization there. How about nonprofit organizations? We could set it up so that there is private operation of grows and processing and sales, but they all have to be nonprofit, and that would reduce some of the commercialization. Some states have the option of for-benefit companies, like Vermont does. They can actually be private profit companies, but they're run for benefit. And finally, one option left, and you might call this the Ohio option, responsible Ohio option, allow very few monitored for-profit licensees. Just have a small group of them, very strictly regulated, and that could avoid a lot of the commercialization. So there you go, Kevin. 8 different ways to and not have big tobacco. We love the earth. That's the time we got for hour 1. Stay tuned for hour 2. Coker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls. We'll talk more about the stories of the day. Trying to get all the music and the volume balanced. Thanks for giving me the clues out there in the chat room. I really appreciate it. Slot from Denver. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it.